expression, tough act to follow, has never been truer.
Run in, Davey, run in!
So the topic today is practice authenticity. And that's a wonderful suggestion, but how you do it and what does it mean? Who decides who you are? Who decides what is the authentic you? As I said earlier, the most dangerous word in the English language is should, because people should on other people all the time. Does anybody disagree with that? Has anyone here never been shoulded about it? I sort of doubt it. And that gets to the crux of the matter. What really matters is the ability of an individual to be totally comfortable in their skin, to be totally at peace with who they really are, and to just say, I don't care what anybody thinks. And if you know me, you know that I live by bumper stickers. And one of my favorite bumper stickers is, what other people think of you is none of your damn business. And I mean that. It doesn't matter what other people think of you, because you can be the authentic self that you are. And the question then is, well, so what is your authentic self? It is, I suggest, anything that you choose it to mean. You get to choose how to express your divinity. And divinity is nothing other than love. That's the best synonym for the divine, is infinite unconditional love. And that is your essence. So the question then gets to be, how do I express love? Can I seriously love Grumpy Trumpy? Well, yeah. Because what he's exhibiting is the opposite of love. He's expressing fear in a giant way. Perhaps for his own devices, but that's what's going on. And that's a great lesson to us. We can take deeper meaning from seeing the expression of fear. Fear takes many, many forms. And what we're up to is being able to express love in every conceivable situation. Just because you love someone doesn't mean that you have to take them to lunch. Seriously. But you can be comfortable with who someone else is choosing to be. Because ultimately, what you are, what you really are speaks way louder than your words. And so it's important to remember that you get to choose how to express the love that you are. Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. So what's going on is in your consciousness, in your psyche, is all of these ideas that have been fed to you, that you should do this, or you shouldn't do that, or you should be this way, you should work hard and study hard and get good grades, and all of the other shoulds that you've bumped into in a lifetime. But that only works so far until you actually wrap your arms around what it is that you really choose to do. What is it that you would do just for the joy of doing it? If money were no object, if time were no object, what would you do? That's a wonderful question to ask yourself. St. Francis of Assisi said, who we are looking for is who is looking. We are the observer. We are paying attention to what's going on, and so we get the opportunity to choose how to express who we are. And who we are is really infinite, unconditional love. Live the question. Live the question, and then the answer will appear. One of the things that people worry about is, what does God want for me? What's God's plan for me? Am I doing the right thing? Well, I would suggest that God has no needs, and therefore doesn't need you to do or be anything. Extraordinary statement. You know, much of the world preaches about God's laws, and you've got to follow them, and so forth and so on. But what I suggest is that God is infinite, unconditional love, and you get to choose how best to express that same radiance. God has no appointments. And since God has no appointments, there can be no disappointments. You can't be disappointed unless you have an appointment. You must have some need in order to be disappointed. I want to tell you a story about expressing love. I just read this in the last couple of weeks in a book called Return from Tomorrow by George Ritchie, who was a psychiatrist, graduate of the University of Virginia. And one of the things that happened to George Ritchie is he was a 20-year-old recruit in basic training in Texas when he died. He had a near-death experience, and it was really quite an extraordinary experience. He survived. He was clinically dead, had been declared so by a doctor, not once but twice in that 9-minute period, and was resuscitated and lived to tell the story. And this book is basically about that experience, but what it also talked about was his subsequent service in World War II after he was resuscitated and came back to life as a soldier. He was assigned to an evacuation hospital, which was the kind of unit that gained fame in the Korean War as MASH units. They were hospital units, and they were specialists in evacuating wounded people and so forth. And after the war was over in 1945, his unit was assigned to a concentration camp in Germany. And their mission was to help all of those people reassign, relocate, and reintegrate them back into society. And of course that was an almost impossible job, because the people who were resident in this concentration camp in Wuppertal, Germany, had not been living in a 5-star hotel for a while. They had been deprived of food, and they were living in conditions that were not very healthful. So they went to this camp, and they were in the process of helping these people reintegrate back into post-war Europe. And the work was tough. They had long, long days, and they were just physically exhausted by all of the work because it was tough sledding. There weren't a lot of records around, and some people came from villages that had been totally wiped out. So what do you do with someone who comes from a place that doesn't even function as a place anymore? So this was exacting work. And one of the people that he bumped into in this work was a prisoner who gave every appearance of being a recent arrivee. He stood erect, his eyes were bright, had a smile on his face, and he had a 7-syllable name that was basically unpronounceable. It was a Polish name, and all of the GIs just simply threw up their hands, and they said, since he had this beautiful handlebar mustache, they called him Wild Bill Cody. So Wild Bill was a very helpful guy. Not only did he speak English, French, German, Russian, and Polish, but he was fluent, of course, in Yiddish, because he was a Jewish member of the community. He totally transformed the lives of those around him because he exhibited this unbelievable energy, indefatigable energy, George Ritchie called it, because he would work 15-hour days and the rest of the team would be exhausted. And he'd say, oh, this old man has been waiting to talk to us all day. Let's do one more. So he would really just pull together this crew and say, let's keep doing this. Let's keep the work going. And then one day it was Wild Bill's turn to be the subject of replacement into the community. And so they got out his records, and they were stunned to learn that he had been at this camp since 1939.
Oh my God.
He had been living in these conditions for 6 years. Starvation diet, unhealthy air, diseases floating around, happening all the time. People were dying right and left. Even in the liberation process, they couldn't get enough medicine and food into the survivors to actually make them survive further. They were having people die every single day. But Wild Bill was just the glowing picture of health. And yet he'd been there for 6 years. So one day they were talking about, George and Wild Bill were talking about hate. And Wild Bill leaned back and stretched his neck a little bit, took a sip on his drink, and he said, well, we were living in the Jewish section of Warsaw, and the German soldiers came in, and they lined us up against the wall, and they opened fire with a machine gun. And my wife and 2 daughters and my 3 little boys were killed right in front of my eyes. And I begged them to kill me so that I could be with them. I didn't really care about living after that point. But they didn't do that because I spoke German and they needed my skills as a translator. So they sent me to a work camp. And he said, right then, right at that moment, I had to make a decision. I had to decide whether I was going to hate the soldiers for what they'd done to the 6 people that meant the most to me, or whether I was going to do something else. And he said, I was a lawyer, in my previous life. And I had seen over and over and over again how destructive hate is as an emotion. It ruins the soul and it ruins the physical health. And I said to myself, all right, here's the choice I'm making right now. I don't know whether I'm going to live 2 more hours, 2 more years, or 2 more decades. But every person that I come in contact with for the rest of my life, I'm going to love. I'm going to simply love them. And that is what motivated Wild Bill. He survived 6 years in a camp. He was the most beloved member of that camp community. He served as arbitrator, judge, translator, peacemaker. He had friends in every section of the camp because of who he was, because of who he was being. So it's entirely possible that when you tap in to that source of love, that you can actually change the physiology of your body. You can actually change how you function as a body. How else can you explain the fact that for 6 years he lived on the same starvation diet of all the rest of the prisoners, and yet was a paragon of health, and was a blessing to every single person that he came in contact with? Now that is an example of how you can be a reflection of the divinity that you are. In the face of that, an unmitigated disaster, standing and watching your beloved wife and 5 children literally murdered right in front of your eyes, how easy it would be to be hateful and bitter and angry. And what would it have gotten you? Not very much, probably. So it's an opportunity and a very good reason to be that, to be the love that you are, to actually make a commitment today, right now, to say, I am going to love every single person that shows up in my life, including those turkey drivers that cut you off, that come roaring up on the right-hand side, and then try to squeeze back in way up the line. You know those? Don't you just want to choke them? I don't speak personal experience. Not me. But we all have that as an example of that need to choke the living daylights out of somebody because they justly deserve it. We've all had those feelings. And the issue is, can you set aside those feelings? Can you say, I'm going to love everybody, without exception? Tall order. But you can do it. And no one can make you do it. And if you think I'm shooting on you, think again. I just offered as an opportunity. You get to choose. You get to create the self that you want to be. So be authentic. Be the real you. Be the divinity that you are. Be the love that you are. Now it's open mic time. Please.